Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to FP1. And now the 2021 driver market was really hotly tipped to be one of the most interesting in recent years. But with the coronavirus pandemic kind of coming into effect, will a lot more of the teams stick to their guns and maybe not change their lineup after all? Now, I thought today might be a good time to talk about what the other 10 teams might do going forward. And of course that means I'm not alone as well. Got a really special guest today in the form of Mike from F1 Fanatics. Mike, how are you and how has your quarantine period been?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. First of all, thank you for kind of having me on. It's really nice to kind of come on to another podcast and just chat F1. And quarantine period, it's as good as it can be. I mean, obviously lacking the missing the racing action a lot, but you know you get by day to day. But hopefully, you know, with Austria looming, that does go ahead. That would be exciting to get some action back.
Yeah, definitely, and it's good to see that they've finally kind of set a preliminary date at least for the racing to get going. Have you been watching the virtual GPs as well and keeping up to date with the sim racing stuff?
I've popped in and out. I'll have to admit that the virtual GPs, I do enjoy it, but it just isn't quite the same feeling for me. But I have been quite enjoying kind of a lot of classic races during this period, so watching the F1 rewinds a lot more and kind of separate classic races has been more of how I've filled the time.
Definitely. Right, so let's jump straight into it then. I think best place to start really is the championship leaders themselves, Mercedes. Now they've kept that same lineup of Bottas and Hamilton since 2017. Could you see the change coming about this year though?
This is a really difficult one because if you asked me before the corona virus kind of took place, I would say 100% it would change and George Russell would come into that seat for 2021. Now, because I'm not sure what of the season we'll get and how much of the season we'll get, what it'll look like in format. I'm not sure whether they'll stick with Bottas for this year and 2021, but I could definitely see George Russell being in that seat by 2022 at the latest.
Yeah, definitely. I guess the other name also shoot out there is Esteban Ocon. Obviously, he's not, I guess, officially affiliated with Mercedes anymore, but he's still under their management. Is there still the option of him coming in if he has a successful season at Renault or 2 seasons at Renault since he's on that 2-year contract?
I think his opportunity went last summer, if I'm honest with you. I mean, if he kind of stands out at Renault, maybe he has the potential to kind of still be put into that frame, but just for me, I kind of feel like George Russell is in the driving seat with that one, just for some reason. That's my gut feel on it.
Yeah, and I guess you could almost compare Russell to as Mercedes Verstappen. He's that driver that's been affiliated with the team for ages. He's made his way through the ranks. He's now into Formula One. He's starting to prove himself, similar to how Max was at Toro Rosso. I think he is. I think you're right. He is the driver that they want to kind of push up there and either have against Hamilton or against Bottas. We still don't know what Hamilton's going to do. I mean, personally, I think he's going to stay. Do you share that belief, or could he move somewhere else? Could he retire altogether from a Formula One?
From what I see of Hamilton, he doesn't look like retiring anytime soon. I think he's full of energy. I think he's full of belief that he can keep smashing records, be that other people's records or his own records, and competing with the next generation and still coming out on top. And I think as long as he feels that he can compete, racing drivers are a long time retired, especially from Formula One. I can certainly see him going for a good 2 or 3, maybe even 4 years to come.
Nice, yeah. And okay, I guess if we went off the hypothetical then, if Hamilton were to say, you know what, I've had enough, I want to focus on music, I want to focus on other things in my life, on my fashion as well, who could replace him? Let's say Russell's out of the equation. What other drivers, perhaps top tier drivers that are in the top teams, do you think could fill that role? I mean, I've got Vettel written down on my piece of paper. If Ferrari pushed him out, do you think Mercedes would go for that option, or would they go for someone younger?
Vettel's a very good option. It would depend on the Ferrari. German link, I suppose Mercedes would probably be the only top team that does appeal to Vettel, because obviously Michael wasn't able to, come back, and he played a part obviously in the rebuilding of Mercedes into the dominant force they are today. But if he went and won a championship at Mercedes, it could be a good thing. But Hamilton's already kind of mastered that legacy. I don't know if the Mercedes would appeal to Vettel as much necessarily on that. Daniel Ricciardo for the short term, I suppose, comes into play, depending on what they want, or if not, do they go for kind of another young Brit in Lando Norris if he continues to perform well, or maybe they pick up a random name in the junior series below in F2 or F3.
That's a good point. And Lando as well. There was not a rumour last year, wasn't there, about him being, or at least going under Mercedes management, supposedly as part of this McLaren Mercedes deal for 2021. Yeah, it could fit, and I'd love to see Lando in a race within car as well. I think he'd do really, really well. Carlos Sainz is another option that's just kind of sprung to mind. Would that work, do you think?
Actually, yeah, no, that definitely is. And I remember on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, I think I said in 5 years' time that I potentially saw a Carlos Sainz and George Russell partnership at Mercedes. So yeah, Carlos Sainz is definitely one, because he would be a very solid, consistent driver. And I know a lot of people rate him quite highly and think that he might even challenge for titles given the right machinery. I'm not sure. I have to kind of see how he kind of develops over the next few years, but he certainly would be a very good driver for Mercedes to kind of bring under the wing.
Definitely. And I think if Sainz doesn't end up at Mercedes, perhaps Ferrari's another option. This might be a good way to kind of move on to them. Obviously, Leclerc's locked down till 2023 or 2024. I can't remember exactly, but he's locked down for a while. Vettel's seat, though, it's not quite looking as secure, and he's supposedly, according to Italian media, rejected that first contract offer. Could we see Ferrari just say, you know what, that's enough, we're going to look somewhere else, and perhaps pick up, say, Sainz or maybe Ricciardo as well? Giovinazzi is another option that I've got written down. He's got that Italian link. What are you thinking on that one?
This is one of the hardest ones for me. Definitely. I keep worrying in my mind, is Sebastian Vettel, because what you have to take into the Ferrari account is the emotional connection that Sebastian Vettel has for Ferrari, and it's whether winning a Constructors with Ferrari is enough with him, because I think maybe his shot at being the number one within that team is gone with the future of Charles Leclerc. So I'm really unsure whether he'll stay or go, but if he goes, the prime candidate for me out of all of them would be Antonio Giovinazzi, just because if he does okay in Alfa Romeo, he would be the absolutely perfect number two for Charles Leclerc.
That is very true. And he's got, obviously, like I said, those Italian links as well. The only other name that I've got written down here, and it is for a little bit of fun, but Fernando Alonso. I mean, he said that he knows what he's doing for 2021, but could that be just a little bit of, pulling the wool over everyone's eyes? Could we see Alonso return to Formula 1 with Ferrari, do you think?
I think I make no secret in public that I'm a Fernando Alonso fan. Look, for me, always, Fernando coming back onto the grid would improve the grid for me, because I still think he would easily come into the top 10 drivers on the grid, and you can argue where in that top 10 he would fit in with people. So he would improve the racing. Back at Ferrari, I just don't think they would risk upsetting Leclerc. As much as fans, I think that would be a brilliant partnership to see how that plays out. For me, I just can't see Fernando going back to Ferrari.
Yeah, and I think for Alonso Leclerc, that'd be fantastic. Where would you see Alonso going if he did ever come back to Formula 1?
I think I stated Renault would be the only one I could kind of see it planning out if Ricciardo moved on to, say, the Ferrari seat, or moved away from Renault. Renault, in the short term, needing very good results, Fernando could be a driver who is a 2-3 year solution for them. Would they potentially have a championship winning car in 2022 if they absolutely nail it? You could argue in the hands of Fernando that he doesn't necessarily need the quickest car on the grid to be a title contender. But yeah, Renault would be the only place I see him coming back, but I think his return is very unlikely, especially with how everything's been pushed back a year.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, also, if he did get that Renault drive, that could be the perfect opportunity for him to maybe chuck in a young driver in that second seat. let's say Ocon gets an opportunity somewhere else, let's say Mercedes or somewhere, or he's not good enough and they get rid of him, they could put one of their young guns in that second seat and have them learn under Alonso for a couple of years before stepping up to the lead driver. That might work really, really well, actually. I guess out of those, I got Lundgaard and Zhou written down as perhaps the two main candidates. There's Jack Aitken as well, who's left that Renault driver program now. But could he ever come back? Maybe. What do you think for that Renault seat? Who could end up there?
I think Lundgaard and Zhou are standout talents. It's a tough one. Both Zhou and Lundgaard are very talented. Zhou has the market of China in his background, and we all know kind of with sometimes politics come in to selecting seats, but he also does have talent to back it up, that he wouldn't just be coming in because he's a key market that F1 would be looking to grow in China. But and Lundgaard, I don't think, the Danish market would necessarily, and they've already got Kevin Magnussen. It is between Lundgaard and Zhou, and it really depends what Renault want or need at the time. Ocon probably for me is the guy who's going to be leading the team for the next 2, 3, 4 years, partnered alongside one of these youngsters, because the Renault Academy is too good not to kind of have at least one of these youngsters be promoted into the team.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree on that one. And I guess sticking with driver academies, we haven't touched on Red Bull yet. Obviously, they've got Verstappen, who's locked down till 2024, and Albon, who he's not yet done a full season with the team, but that second half of 2019, he did impress. Do you think he will do enough this year to keep that seat into 2021?
I'm not sure. Is the cop-out answer on that one? Because Albon, as well as he did, I was really interested to see how 2020 went for him, because he would have a full pre-season under his belt, and would he start competing with the Ferrari and the Mercedes Max Verstappen needs him to help him kind of challenge for the title? Because Gasly's main problem there was he wasn't competing for podiums there, and although Albon came in and consistently performed well, he didn't really challenge the Mercedes or the Ferraris in the Grand Prix that he competed in, other than if Bottas, or obviously in Brazil where he almost got the podium, he took advantage of Bottas, Leclerc and Vettel all retiring. So that is my only kind of big stumbling block on him. If he can compete, I think he's the perfect number 2 for Max.
I think, yeah, I completely agree with you on that one. Also, Red Bull are kind of coming out of that situation where they didn't have anyone in their junior lineup. Now you've got Yuki Tsunoda in F2, you've got Yuri Vips as well, I think he's in Super Formula this year. Matsushita, he's not an officially Red Bull affiliated driver, but he is Honda backed, and Honda really want to get him into Formula 1, so maybe that means he'll end up with AlphaTauri first. But there are these drivers coming up through the wings, and Albon is going to start, I think, feeling the pressure if he's not performing like Gasly wasn't at the start of 2019. Speaking of Gasly and Kvyat, like I said, they're at AlphaTauri at the moment. Could either of them make a comeback to the team like I guess we've seen some other drivers in the past? But Albon's come back through the Red Bull driver program. Could we see those two make a return or not?
I think Kvyat, that ship has sailed. Just for whatever reason, they don't seem to get on well. I was one of the ones who believed he probably should have been given another shot in the Red Bull seat in the second half of the season, especially in that kind of first half of the season with then Toro Rosso, obviously now AlphaTauri. I thought it was very good. Obviously, the climax of that was the podium that he got in Germany. It was a very good drive in the wet, and I thought he was a little hard done by not getting it. So if they've overlooked him with that good a start to the season, I don't see them kind of going back to Kvyat. Maybe because I don't think Kvyat would maybe toe the line as much as one of the younger two. And Pierre Gasly, I can only see him returning if Max leaves, say, in the future. But I don't see Max leaving, so I don't see Pierre Gasly going there. I see Gasly both going off to kind of more midfield teams to kind of lead them up.
And I guess the other names, I guess, throw into the mix there with that Red Bull seat if Albon's not performing. And again, I don't believe this myself as much as I'd love to see it, being a massive Daniel Ricciardo fan, but he did say that he wouldn't rule out a return to Red Bull if it was the best option on the grid for him. And I guess Red Bull are coming up, so maybe from Ricciardo's point of view that works. Would the team share the same opinion though and let him back into that team?
I think that bridge isn't totally burnt. And I think if Albon wasn't performing, they didn't want to go with Gasly or Kvyat, and the youngsters definitely would be kind of too experienced to come in. I think Daniel Ricciardo would be a very good fit, and they know how kind of Max and Ricciardo go together. It wouldn't be the most harmonious, but it would be on track, that is. But off track, it would be very good. They know Ricciardo's a great ambassador for the Red Bull brand, comes with good popularity, comes with, you know, he will compete for podiums and race wins, which will be great for the team and the constructors. I could see it happening, but it would have to be if Albon really flopped.
Yeah, and I think, also would Daniel want to work with Verstappen, because Verstappen's now that definite number one. Although you could argue that, towards the end of Ricciardo's tenure at Red Bull, he was being kind of shoved down to that number two footing. Would he really want to work with Verstappen on that number one, number two basis? I personally don't think so. He wants to be the number one driver. And sadly for Ricciardo, I just can't really see a team at the moment that, apart from Renault, at least definitely only the top three teams that would put him in as that number one. So it is a difficult one for him. So to what Renault, we did touch on them. So let's move on to McLaren. McLaren, I think, have the strongest lineup. Definitely. I mean, Sainz and Norris work brilliantly together. I think the only way I can see that changing is if one of them decides to leave. And could that happen? Could you see one of them leave? I guess we talked about Sainz perhaps going to Mercedes or Ferrari. Lando, is he there for the future, or could we see him jump ship?
This, for me, feels like one of those lockdown partnerships. I think they've got a really good relationship at the moment. Obviously, if McLaren do get to the stage where they're competing for podiums and race wins again, then that would naturally put pressure on that relationship. But for now, I don't think McLaren would want to shift it. I don't think Lando Norris or Carlos Sainz would want to shift it. They're in a great place. There is no favouritism in the team. They keep working hard for the team. They look like they're loving their racing. They're loving the direction that McLaren are going for. And like you said, I think it's a very strong partnership on the grid. Best of the rest last year. Lando's only going to keep getting better with experience, I imagine. Carlos Sainz will be keen to, build this McLaren team for him, and he can see it as the potential to be his shot at having a race-winning car with the resources that McLaren have. So, yeah, I don't see this one changing at all.
Yeah, and as we touched on earlier, that McLaren-Mercedes partnership, given how dominant and how brilliant that has been in the past, that's a really exciting prospect to look on in the future. And I know we looked at that a little bit with the McLaren-Honda relationship, but we know how well tested this Mercedes engine is and how brilliant that engine is. So that is exciting. I guess, I'm going to throw this name into the hat again. Alonso, could he come back if, let's say, Sainz did up in a Mercedes or Ferrari?
Yes, he could. Going back to, and with McLaren Mercedes as well, and he's obviously still linked with McLaren, going to drive for them in the Indy 500. That kind of goes ahead in the future. He was obviously lined up with the team to have an entry with at least try and qualify for it. It's a difficult one. He very much could do, but this would certainly be the most unlikely of the three places that we discussed.
Okay, let's move on then. Racing Point, I guess, the next one on my list. Or Aston Martin, as we're known from next year. And that, again, is a really exciting name to see back into the sport. Obviously, I think Perez is locked down till, I believe it's 2022. It might be 2021, but he's at least locked down for the next couple of years. I'm not confident that contract is going to stay all the way, though. I feel like if either Perez performs quite well, he could see an offer from, let's say, a McLaren if they lose Sainz, or even perhaps someone like Ferrari or Mercedes. They might just give him that shot he wants. And then also, if he doesn't perform, And obviously with Aston Martin coming in, I wouldn't be surprised to see them sign on a massive big name, say a Ricciardo or maybe even a Vettel, something like that. Maybe those two are a bit crazy suggestions. But obviously we know Stroll is most likely locked down in that seat for, reasons that we I think we all know. But could we see that lineup changing, do you think?
Yes, it's an interesting one with Sergio, because I know he was before, obviously when Alonso and Van Dorn both left McLaren at the end of the 2018 season. I know he was in the frame for that seat as well. He certainly is one that I think the top teams do look at, and if he keeps performing at the level, especially that he did in the second half of last season, because obviously he was the top point scorer out of any of the guys below the top 6 teams in the second half of the season last year. I don't know. I just feel he's been with that team for such a long time, and Aston Martin have the potential for me to become a big team, and I think they're happy and willing to give Checo that backing to do it. And if anyone is, I know everyone thinks Lance is secure, but if he doesn't come up to the required level, I don't think his dad's just going to keep on pumping money. He's all in now in this investment. He hasn't. This isn't just him paying for his son to have a seat. He's all in on the team's success as well. So if Lance isn't contributing to that, then I can see him becoming like a reserve driver for the team, because he'd be a very good reserve and backup driver for the team. And then that would be the slot that, maybe. God, I always think Pierre Gasly would be quite a good partnership with Checo and himself driving Aston Martin forward, especially in the early stages of that partnership or rebranding.
That'd be an interesting lineup. I hadn't even considered that. I guess then, what about Kvyat? Obviously, as you said, you think his chances are shot with Red Bull. Could this be a possible fresh start for him? Get out of that Red Bull family. He still gets with Aston Martin. I can't remember whether Aston Martin was still affiliated with Red Bull back when Kvyat was racing for them. It might have been just before they kind of switched from Infinity. But could you see Kvyat go there?
I see Kvyat, for some reason, more affiliated to the Ferrari-based teams, if he still holds out hope for maybe one day getting a shot to drive for Ferrari. And maybe, if Kimi retires in the next couple of years, or, they Haas move out Grosjean, I think the Ferrari affiliated teams for Kvyat would be more of the option that he would lean towards. And yeah, I think someone like Aston Martin would prefer Gasly out of the two. Okay,
yeah, I can get that. And I guess that might be a good way to move on to Haas then. This is the other place I was going to probably put Kvyat if need be. We've kind of heard that, no kind of solid rumours, but a lot of people in the community wouldn't be surprised to see, say, Kvyat move there. Would he replace Magnussen or not Hulkenberg? I'll get on to Hulkenberg in a minute. Magnussen or Grosjean, or could we see both of them end up out of that team?
I think it depends on the relationship between Magnussen and Günther Steiner. If Drive to Survive Season 2 is anything to go back, there's a lot of things, obviously, it plays into kind of dramatisation to kind of sell a story, but it doesn't seem the most harmonious relationship between the two. So that would be the only reason I could see Kevin Magnussen leaving Haas, if he didn't want to work with Günther anymore. Grosjean is the one that I go, talented, very quick driver. Harshly kind of treated, I think, a lot of the time in the community. Yes, obviously he's had his incidents before, but he's also been around the sport for 10 years. It's probably the one that you would look at and go, you've had your time, we might try ourselves with a Daniel Kvyat, and his technical feedback would be pretty good because he was a test driver for Ferrari for the year that he had outside of Formula 1. So yeah, Grosjean is the most vulnerable, I think, in that seat.
Yeah, and Kvyat might be a good kind of interim driver as well to perhaps kind of build up someone in that, I guess, that young driver pool for Haas. They've obviously got Fittipaldi in there and a few others as well. That could maybe fit, and perhaps have an all-new lineup, ditch both Magnussen and Grosjean, and then put in, say, Fittipaldi and Kvyat, have Kvyat build up Fittipaldi to the point where he can lead that team. That's obviously a famous name as well, which would work quite well for the Haas brand. Were Grosjean and Magnussen to leave, or either of them to leave, could you see them ending up somewhere else on the grid?
Kevin Magnussen, definitely. I think he's a very hard-fighting driver, and given the machinery, he certainly can compete higher up on the grid. Successfully. I mean, he scored a podium, didn't he, in his first ever race when he paired Jenson Button at McLaren. So Kevin Magnussen, I feel definitely might be snapped up by someone. He potentially even could go into the Aston Martin seat if that, was something that they wanted to go with, two solid drivers in Perez and Magnussen. But
that'd be nice to see.
But
definitely,
that would be very interesting. Grosjean, Haas is the end for him unless he has a miraculous season and someone wants to, take a punt on him, like maybe Williams, because Grosjean does come with backing and certainly would be a good development driver to help them in their current situation. But he would have to have a really good 2020 season to convince anyone of that.
I guess the only other name to really chuck in there for that Haas seat would be Nico Hülkenberg. Obviously, he lost out his race seat to Renault for this year. Very nearly came close to taking that Haas seat off Grosjean, but in the end, Haas stuck to what they knew. Back then, they were doing that, I guess, to kind of keep it, I guess, steady over the switch into the new 2021 regulations. Now, obviously, that they've been postponed by a year. Could this make them perhaps reconsider their options and maybe sign on a Hülkenberg somewhere, even as perhaps a test driver or something?
I don't know if the Haas opportunity would appeal to Nico. Because...
Okay. How do you mean?
Well, he's spoken about it recently, I think, saying about his plan is to return to F1, but it has to be like a exciting opportunity. And I just think the fragility of Haas's involvement in the sport, we're not too sure, if performances keep going how they are. I think Gene Haas is very ready to kind of pull the plug on the whole project, which would be a massive shame. But it's a very insecure seat, and I think Nico wants to rebuild his reputation and say, look, I am good enough for this opportunity. For me, I just think Nico's time has been and gone. He was unlucky to kind of lose out on things, and Renault didn't kind of work out how he hoped it would. But yeah, I just feel like his time's been and gone now.
Yeah, I as much as I'd love to see Hülkenberg back and get that podium finally, but I've got to kind of concede on that one. It is a shame, and I just don't know if any team would really go for him, given, I guess, A, the pay packet he's asking for, and B, the fact he's not really that young driver for the future anymore that he was when he joined the sport 10 years ago now, which really doesn't feel like that. But let's move on. Then we spoke about AlphaTauri a little bit, so let's look at the other Alfa Romeo. Now, Kimi Räikkönen and Antonio Giovinazzi, a pretty solid pairing at the moment, but not one that realistically is going to last for a long period of time. You've got Räikkönen, who, this is the last year of his contract. Could we see him go on for another year, or is this the end for him? Is he going to retire?
I think Kimi's going to keep going for some reason, for his interviews that he's spoken about, and in terms of his in terms of like his enjoyment of the sport. I think he's up for it, and I think he's intrigued by 2022 to see what it's like, whether Alfa still want him. His performances were still very solid, I think, last year. First half of the season especially, he was very good, but as Alfa's performance kind of tailed off and they started kind of being at the back of the grid, so did Kimi's performances. But obviously they still got, was it 4th and 5th in Japan? Or Brazil? No, it was Brazil, wasn't it?
Brazil,
it was Brazil, yeah. So he still shows he can put a car around and be competitive there. And I see him carrying on, and partnering him would be one of 4 essentially, depending on how the F2 season goes, which would be Mick Schumacher, Robert Schwartzman, Marcus Armstrong and Callum Ilott. I think they're all part of the Ferrari Academy. They're the ones that they're all in really good teams. Obviously, both Schwartzman and Schumacher in Prema. ART has Marcus Armstrong, obviously won it the last couple of years, the driver titles, and whereas Callum Ilott's in Uni Virtuosi.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those I would see one of those four getting the seat, depending on how they perform.
And they're all top teams as well, because Uni Virtuosi before was Russian Time, which won the team's championship. I can't remember what year it was, a few years ago, but they've always kind of stayed there as well. And I think Schumacher's, even if he isn't the strongest of the four, I feel like he's the most likely to get in. But I feel like if he really does tail off and Schwartzman flies home with the championship, which could happen, he's a very strong driver. I'm not sure about Armstrong. I feel like he's sort of there and he could maybe sneak into Formula 1 after a few years in F2, since how Latifi's doing at the moment. But I don't know. I feel like Schwartzman and Schumacher, it's between those two. And if Schwartzman can run away with it, he'll get that Alpha seat. But if he only narrow the edges out Schumacher, I feel like that name, as much as he's trying to say it's not my name that gets there, I feel that Schumacher name, given the amount of PR that's going to bring with it, could just sneak into that Alpha seat. Or maybe even a seat at Haas or somewhere. Ferrari might be able to kind of, chuck a bit of money under the table and see if we can get a team there. But definitely, would you see Giovinazzi staying in that team then? Or obviously we talked about him going to Ferrari. I guess the end of his season last year was very, very good. The start of it was a little bit poor though, so I'm still kind of waiting to see how 2020 goes for him and whether he can keep that pace up. What could be Gio's future?
Yeah, 2020 is a real big season for Giovinazzi, because if he can show the development and how he kept on improving in the second half of that season, like I said, he seems with the Italian, heritage, moving in at Ferrari, the perfect guy to kind of mould into a number two to kind of support Charles Leclerc, which is when Ferrari worked best as a team. And also he would operate as a pretty good fill in that Ferrari seat, while Mick and Robert, who I agree, I think those are the top two candidates to progress up into the seat. It's a filler with either of them kind of coming into the Ferrari seat maybe 3-4 years time.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that one. Last team to look at then is Williams. They got Russell and Latifi, but I think it's fairly certain, we spoke about it earlier, that Russell's not going to be in that team forever, and I feel like he has got his sights set on one of the top teams and he can get there. They've got a fairly strong junior pool at the moment. Obviously Jack Aitken, Dan Ticktum and Roy Nassani, as well as Jamie Chadwick as well, and that could be another option. I could just remember that now. Out of those four drivers, could we see them to make the step up?
If Dan Ticktum has a good F2 season, he's the best out of the four of them. Jack Aitken, I like Jack Aitken a lot, and I think he's one who's kind of struggled for funding, so that's hinders his ability along the way. Not his ability as a driver, but his ability to impress. The funding is a difficult one, but if Jack Aitken can impress, I think it's between Dan Ticktum and Jack Aitken, and whoever performs the best, they'll both be and Jack Aitken would be a better brand ambassador, I think, for Williams. He's very good in front of the PR. I know, obviously, he's done a lot of stuff with the F1 recently, and I think he's a very popular guy with the fans. I think a lot of people were rooting for Jack to make that seat, but Dan Ticktum, for me, probably has the better ability out of the two.
Yeah, and Jamie Chadwick, obviously we've seen Williams in the past trying to push that first female driver in F1 in, I can't remember how many years it is now, but I guess with Susie Wolff as well, we got her into a practice session. Is there any hope for her getting a seat if she can impress in, I guess she's in the W Series at the moment, possibly thinking about trying to make that step up to Formula 3 or maybe even Formula 2? What do you think her future could be?
I think Jamie Jamie Chadwick, I saw her in the W Series last year, and I think she's a very talented driver. And obviously, she did quite well in the F3 Asia Championship over the winter as well. She progressed, she got better, and at the end started getting on the podium. There's clear talent there. I think where Jamie Chadwick will be in terms of for women making it into Formula One, I think she will be another stepping stone. She'll inspire another generation. She's already massively popular. I saw so many when I went to the season finale at Brands Hatch, there was so many young girls interested in their support in the series, which was fantastic. So I think she'll offer as a platform to inspire that next generation, and she might make it up to F2 in seasons to come. But I think maybe she's in that endurance. What's the Extreme E? That's the rally series that's coming. I know she's got a seat secured for that in the future, and I can see her competing in World Endurance Championship and GT racing at quite a high level. Maybe even Formula E. I don't know. That might not be beyond her to compete in that championship.
Yeah, I think, did she not take part with the rookie test for Formula E recently as well? So you could be onto something there. So that's all the 10 teams talked about. I think the last thing I just want to talk about now is, could we see a new team on the grid? There was a report, I think just the other day, that the Panthera Team Asia team was still, that's a lot of teams, we're still on track to make their F1 debut in around the 2022-2023 season. As well, in the past, we've heard about the Campos entry with the budget cap as well. It's making F1 a lot more appealing. Go back a few years, we had Carlin make the move to IndyCar and basically say we can't go to F1 because it's too expensive now. But with that budget cap, what do you think of the possibility of there being new teams? And I guess this then allows more drivers to step up into that top tier of motorsport.
I would love more teams to be in it, but it's that basis where it has to be competitive. And yeah, Pantera seem the one most driven on it, definitely. I think they're the guys who really are pushing to get that entry in 2022. But will they? I think the way that the FIA and Ross Brawn in particular have spoken about it in terms of securing 10 strong teams, and obviously with everything and the financial pressure I imagine the teams are on during this period, I think rather than admitting a team in 2022, the only way I can see it as soon as 2022 would be, say, if a Haas or a Williams weren't able to compete anymore, because I think they're probably the two most insecure places on the grid currently.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that one, and I guess you're talking about the teams that were being bought out, and it would be at least nice to see if we did lose one of those teams, the actual entity and those jobs stay in Formula 1 as well. I think that's the main thing. Obviously, it'd be absolutely devastating to lose, especially a team like Williams that have been around for so long now. But I guess if they could always carry their legacy on in the form of another guy's, at least, those jobs are no longer at risk and people are still employed. So, and given the coronavirus situation where we're losing so many jobs all across the world, trying to keep people employed is really, really important at the moment. But, that was about everything I had to talk about. Is there any other points that you wanted to make before we finish up?
No, I think it's been great. I hope you enjoyed it. It was interesting talking about you threw some names in there, and I was like, oh, could they eat? It's always fun, I think, talking about the driver market, because we really don't know. And in the time where there's no racing, it's even more fun to speculate about this stuff, because everyone like Fernando constantly puts himself in the media, which I know drives some people insane, in terms that Nico's doing his one as well, that they're all plug-in, they're all playing the politics with no racing, and I'm sure there's lots of moves behind the scenes currently doing it. But Will, it's been brilliant coming on. Thank you, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, and thanks again for coming back onto the onto the channel. And hopefully we can do this again sometime. I actually did with Formula 1, we just never know. But of course, again, thank you, Mike. I will leave all of Mike's details in the description below, so make sure you do subscribe to F1 Fanatics. They're a fantastic YouTube channel, and I'll also leave his Twitter so you can give them a follow on there as well. This is really just to start the discussion now, guys. What I want you to let me know down in the comments is who you think will go where for 2021 or 2022 and beyond, and could we see another new team hit the grid in the near future? Like I said, let me know down in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to like, comment, and of course, subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next one.